do you scale EX in a global organization?
That almost feels like the EX question of the year 2020.
Good.
It's really the driving question for these large organizations. So in the past years, I think they've more focused on 1 out of 3 things that were like reasonable and typical to do. One was employee listening, so I've learned to capture more feedback so I can provide better experiences. Number 2, companies have learned to embed design thinking and journey mapping, so human-centered design aspects into the work. Or number 3, they've invested in new technology that has cool apps and better experiences through that. And what they now see is that these 3 avenues alone and in isolation won't get them to the business outcomes they were hoping for. So now they are thinking about how to bring the 3 together and manage it at scale. So it's not all about I'm designing experiences, it's actually about delivering them in these large organizations, multi-matrix organizations across the world. That is the big question. And the answer to the question is, in one sentence, think big, start small, and then iterate as you scale. For doing that, we've developed a 5-step model, and probably that's the answer, the real answer to your question, what large organizations are doing. So step number 1 is create an experience baseline. So measure the experience in the most important moments. Don't do that in a super sophisticated way, but in a simplified way. Have your employee experience baseline created. That will help you identify problem spaces and will at the same time identify quick wins. So you can quickly produce and you know what the real problem spaces are. That's a good thing. You can benchmark it. So if it's a standardized baseline, then you can benchmark it, create urgencies and burning platform. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is then out of that or from that baseline, you'd create your roadmap, your priorities. Because what's the most important part for that is to align the organization, actually the entire company, behind it. So you have
because of course it's not just HR that's responsible.
Exactly. So in this road mapping, you can almost say it's a strategic intent plus strategic response thing. So in this strategic intent, you have to be very clear on the business value that you want to provide. In the roadmap, you have to be very clear on how do I do that. So what are my priorities, my budgets, my responsibilities of it for the typical roadmap is 18 to 36 months for the next 1.5 to 3 years. That's step number 2. Step number 3 is then we strongly advise that the first 3 months of that roadmap is a proof project. So find the 2, 3, 4, 5 moments that matter and find a business in which you can test it and prove the concept. And in this 3 months proof project, what we see companies do is they're doing 2 things. They're actually redesigning the experiences. So they are using human-centered design. They are involving line managers and employees and HR and other support functions and specialists to redesign the experience. And then to measure if the improvement is actually showing. That's the redesign part of the proof project. In parallel, another team would work on how does this work in our organization at scale. So how do we embed employee experience redesign and delivery in the flow of work? So what's the operating model almost of employee experience in this very company? How does it work? How does it relate to other things that we're doing? And who has to act when? That has to be conceptualized, and that's also happening in this first 3 months of that roadmap in the proof project. That was step number 3, the proof project. Step number 4 then is build a platform that everyone can see the employee experience. The platform would provide access to what a good design of an experience looks like, and what our teams in Brazil have done to improve the informal career conversations of managers with their direct teams. So share is one big aspect of the platform. The other aspect of it is measure. So you can see in dashboards how the experience in your team is doing compared to other teams in the organization. These two things are the big enablers for employee experience at scale. There's a single point of truth, and there is data and dashboards that trigger action, so we can almost reverse the direction by which we manage employee experience. It's not driven from the top into the organization. It's a pull effect. Single teams are pulling for it.
You could have, if you look at onboarding, for example, so you could show a moment that matter could be you sit down with your manager in your first week, and you could show parts of the business where that's happening and the impact, that's a positive impact that's having on experience.
Exactly.
And you could see other parts of the business where that isn't happening and the detrimental effect that it's having.
Exactly. That's one. So the logic would be, I as a team manager somewhere in Kuala Lumpur would see that the onboarding experience in my team is not as good as the average onboarding experience. I can look into which of the 4 or 5 moments within onboarding that matter the most is where the experience breaks. And I can see in my employee experience platform what a good design of that manager interaction during onboarding should look like. So that's a little bit the way that the platform is helping to scale it up. And then step number 5 is to add something onto the platform. A platform as such is not good enough in these large organizations. We need a partly agile team to help with redesign and delivery of experiences. So this agile team has 2 or 3 people from the central EX team in it, but also has experts depending on the very question that we now have to redesign to be drawn into this agile team. So that's the 5 steps that bring organizations to scale, and that's, as I said, the 2020 number 1 thing to go after.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.